February 11th, 2015, the third anniversary of Whitney Houston's death. During renovation work in the basement of Newark Beth Israel Hospital, a worker found a metal safe hidden behind an old rusty cabinet. The date on it showed 1995. When the safe was opened, its contents deeply shook the hospital administration. 137 letters written in Whitney Houston's handwriting, 42 cassette tapes, gift boxes with different children's names written on each, and most importantly, original recordings of 12 gospel songs that no one knew existed. When one of the cassettes was played, Whitney's familiar yet somehow different voice echoed through the hospital corridors. This wasn't the Whitney Houston who sang to millions on stages. This was the voice of an angel whispering hope to dying children in the darkness of night. But what was most shocking was the content of the seventh cassette. Whitney was speaking, and what she said revealed one of the best-kept secrets in music history. If this story is going to touch you deeply too, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Because what I'm about to tell you is a miracle story that even Whitney Houston's fans didn't know about, kept secret for 20 years and only came to light after her death. Turn on notifications so you don't miss touching true stories like this. The silent beginning on a cold December night in 1995, the pediatric cancer ward of Beth Israel Hospital in Newark's poorest neighborhood was wrapped in its usual silence. Night shift nurse Patricia Coleman heard a soft melody coming from the end of the third-floor corridor while doing her routine checks. It was well past midnight, and no one should have been there at that hour. When Patricia walked toward where the sound was coming from, she noticed that the door to room 307 was ajar. The voice coming from inside was soft like a lullaby but equally powerful. When Patricia slightly opened the door, she froze at the sight before her. A woman with her face half covered by a scarf was sitting at the bedside of 7-year-old leukemia patient Jasmine Williams, singing gospel to her. Years later, Patricia would describe that moment like this: "I immediately knew who the woman was, but I couldn't believe it. Why would Whitney Houston come here in the middle of the night, hiding her identity, I thought. But when I saw the expression on Jasmine's face, everything changed. She was smiling for the first time in months. After that night, I never told anyone about Whitney's visits, because she made me promise. This had to remain a secret." Whitney Houston was at the peak of her career at that time. The Bodyguard soundtrack was breaking records worldwide. Concert tickets were selling out in minutes. But no one knew that Whitney, every first and third Saturday night of the month, would take off her stage costumes, put on ordinary clothes, and go to the hospital in Newark. Security guard Marcus Johnson was noting those nights in a special notebook, but at Whitney's request, he hadn't shared these records with anyone, until that safe was found in 2015. Meeting Jasmine Whitney's first encounter with Jasmine Williams had actually happened by chance. On the night of December 3, 1995, Whitney had gone to visit a friend's cousin at the hospital. When she went to the wrong floor, a crying sound from one room caught her attention. When she entered, she saw a 7-year-old girl, bald with a pale complexion. Jasmine was alone that night because her mother had to go home, and she was scared. Whitney sat beside her and asked, "What's your name, sweetie?" Jasmine answered, "Jasmine Williams." "What's your name?" Whitney hesitated for a moment. Then she smiled and said, "Call me Mary," and held Jasmine's hand. That night Whitney sang to Jasmine for 2 hours, told her stories. As she was leaving the hospital toward dawn, she had made a decision. She wouldn't leave this child alone. When Whitney came back the next week, she brought small gifts with her: a teddy bear, coloring books, and most importantly, a small cassette player. There were gospel songs she had recorded especially for Jasmine on the cassette. Whitney told Jasmine, "Let this be our secret, okay?" Jasmine nodded and smiled for the first time in weeks. The miraculous voice on Whitney's third visit, something unexpected happened. Jasmine began to accompany the song Whitney was singing. Her voice was weak, but her pitch was perfect. Whitney stopped in amazement and looked at Jasmine. "Have you had singing lessons before?" she asked. Jasmine shook her head. "No, but I always listen to your songs. My mom plays your cassettes for me." That night Whitney realized there was something special in Jasmine's voice. Despite her illness, this little girl's voice was pure and impressive. Whitney began to show her vocal techniques, breathing exercises, voice warm-ups. With each visit, she taught Jasmine something new. Dr. Michael Roberts described the change in Jasmine's condition like this. Jasmine's response to treatment was incredible. It was as if she had found a new reason to live. We would see her morale mysteriously rise every Saturday night. When we came Monday mornings, Jasmine would be singing. When the nurses told her she shouldn't strain her voice, she would say, "My teacher gave me permission." Secret recordings. In March 1996, Whitney made an important decision. She began recording a special album for the children in the hospital. At midnight, after everyone was asleep, she would turn the hospital's old conference room into a studio. With the portable recording device she brought, she was recording special gospel songs for each child. These recordings would never be released. They would only be for the children in the hospital. The songs Whitney sang in these recordings were works she had written herself, never included in any album in her career. Each song told a child's story. A song of hope for Marcus, a song of courage for Emily, a healing prayer for David. But the most special was the piece she wrote for Jasmine called Angels in the Ward. Someone who helped Whitney as a sound technician and kept their identity hidden said this, after listening to the recordings that emerged in 2015. Whitney's voice in those recordings was completely different from what we heard in the studio. It was more raw, more real, deeper. It was as if she was revealing the purest state of her soul. There was no search for technical perfection, just pure love and hope. Jasmine's recovery. A miracle happened in the summer months of 1996. Jasmine's cancer cells began to regress. Doctors couldn't find a medical explanation for this. Her positive response to chemotherapy treatment was much better than expected. In September, Jasmine's hair began to grow back, and she could stand up for the first time. When Whitney came to the hospital that night, she found Jasmine sitting up in bed. The little girl said, laughing, "Mary, look, I can stand up," and got out of bed. Whitney couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged Jasmine and whispered in her ear, "You've become my miracle, Jasmine." But Jasmine's response was even more touching. "No, Mary, you're my angel." That night, Whitney revealed her true identity to Jasmine. "I'm not really Mary, Jasmine. My name is Whitney," she said. Jasmine's eyes widened. "Whitney Houston, the real Whitney Houston." Whitney nodded. "But this is our secret, remember?" Other children. Whitney's presence in the hospital wasn't limited to just Jasmine. She would go into different rooms with each visit, spending special time with each child. 8-year-old Marcus Thompson had lost his sight due to a brain tumor. Whitney read books to him every week. 5-year-old Emily Rodriguez couldn't speak, but Whitney had learned to communicate with her in sign language. 12-year-old David Kim was confined to a wheelchair, but was learning to make music with the small piano Whitney brought. Each child had a special bond with Whitney. She introduced herself to them not just as Whitney, but with different names like Mary, Sarah, Grace. But there was one thing common for all of them: the voice echoing in the hospital corridors on those nights. Whitney's voice was the voice of healing, hope, and love for them. Head nurse Catherine Murphy described that period like this: "There would be a different atmosphere in the hospital on Saturday nights. The children would wait excitedly. No one would say it openly, but everyone knew that someone special would come that night. When we saw the happiness on the children's faces on Monday mornings, our faith in the power of treatment would increase." Bobby Brown period and crisis. In 1997, Whitney's marriage to Bobby Brown was deteriorating. The media was constantly following them, making news of every moment. But Whitney wasn't neglecting her hospital visits. In fact, these visits had become an escape, a refuge for her. In a letter she wrote to Jasmine, she said, "Dear Jasmine, the outside world is sometimes very noisy and complicated, but those quiet moments I spend with you remind me what real peace is." One night, Whitney came to the hospital in worse shape than usual. Her eyes were red, her voice was hoarse. When Jasmine saw her, she asked, "Mary, have you been crying?" Whitney nodded. "Sometimes adults cry too, Jasmine." Jasmine held Whitney's hand and said, "Then let me sing for you." And Jasmine began to sing Amazing Grace, that Whitney had taught her. Whitney cried silently. That night was when the roles reversed. The sick child was healing the wounded adult. Secret concert on Christmas Eve 1998. Whitney came to the hospital administration with a special offer. She wanted to give a secret concert for the children. The hospital director hesitated at first, but was convinced by Whitney's sincerity. On the night of December 24th, the hospital cafeteria was transformed into a small concert hall. Only the children in the hospital, their families, and staff were there. 50 people in total. That night, Whitney gave perhaps the most meaningful concert of her career. There were no stage costumes, no makeup, no light show, just a piano, a microphone, and her voice. For 2 hours she sang gospel songs, did duets with the children, told stories. She called Jasmine to the stage, and they sang His Eye is on the Sparrow together. The hall was drowning in tears. The only recorded evidence of that night was a 3-minute blurry video taken by hospital security guard Anthony Davis with his cell phone. When the video emerged in 2015, it went viral. It had captured a moment different from Whitney's performances, watched millions of times, an intimate and pure moment. Last visits and farewell. In the early 2000s, Whitney's own health problems began to increase. Her voice wasn't what it used to be. She was physically tired, but the hospital visits continued. She could now come once a month and looked weaker each time. Jasmine was now 12 years old and had completely beaten cancer. She was old enough to notice Whitney's condition. In May 2001, Whitney brought Jasmine a special gift, one of her own Grammy Awards. She had written this note on it: "To Jasmine, one day you'll win these too. I believe in you. I'll always be proud of you." Whitney. Her last visit was in January 2002. Whitney was different than usual that night. She went to each child's room one by one, hugged them all special gifts. When she came to Jasmine, she hugged her for a long time and whispered in her ear, "I might not be able to come for a while, but you keep singing. Never lose your voice." Jasmine understood that Whitney was saying goodbye. "Mary, you'll come back, won't you?" she asked. Whitney smiled. "I'll be with you every time you sing." Letters and legacy. Whitney couldn't come to the hospital after that last visit, but she continued to send letters. Handwritten letters special for each child. The last letter she sent to Jasmine was in December 2011, just 2 months before her death. The letter said, "My dear Jasmine, you can't know how lucky I am to have known you. You taught me the real meaning of life. I sang to millions on stage, but every note I sang for you was more valuable than all of them. You're 18 now, and you have dreams. Follow those dreams, make your voice heard to the world, and remember, I'll always be with you." When the news of Whitney Houston's death came on February 11, 2012, Jasmine was studying music at university. She was devastated when she heard the news. She wanted to speak at the funeral, but wasn't invited. No one knew about her connection with Whitney. She could only say goodbye from afar with her tears. Discovery of the safe and revealed secret. When the safe was found in 2015, one of the letters inside was addressed to the hospital administration. Whitney had written to whoever finds this safe, "Please deliver these recordings and letters to the children. I prepared them specially for each one. They were my real family." Everyone knew Whitney Houston on stage, but those hospital corridors where I was known as Mary, Sarah, Grace, were my real home. When the safe was opened, master recordings of 12 gospel songs came out. Each was written for a different child. They had names like Angels, In the Ward, Heaven's Lullaby, Healing Grace, Tomorrow's Promise. When music critics listened to these recordings, they said Whitney's voice had never been so pure and emotional. Jasmine Williams is now 35 years old and works as a music teacher in Newark. With the foundation she established, she gives music lessons to children in hospitals. At the beginning of each lesson, she reminds her students of something Whitney taught her: real voice comes from your heart. Technique can be taught, but soul is felt, final word and eternal echo. Whitney Houston's secret hospital visits were the unknown, but perhaps most meaningful part of her career. Her voice that reached millions actually left the deepest impact in the hearts of children, going back and forth between death and life in those dark hospital rooms. Today, Whitney's photo hangs in the pediatric cancer ward of Newark Beth Israel Hospital. Underneath it says, Whitney Houston 1995 to 2002. Not just a voice, but a light of hope. It said that sometimes in the silence of night, a melody can still be heard in those hospital corridors. Perhaps Whitney's spirit is still there beside those children, whispering hope to them. Marcus is now a music therapist for the blind and visually impaired. Emily is a sign language teacher and teaches deaf children how to feel music. David became a physical therapist and works with paralyzed children. Timothy is a professional guitarist who plays at charity events for sick children. They all continue Whitney's legacy in their own ways. Every year on February 11th, the anniversary of Whitney's death, they meet at the hospital. Jasmine leads them in singing Angels in the Ward that Whitney wrote especially for her. And each time they feel as if Whitney is there too, singing with them. In 2020, during the pandemic, Jasmine organized virtual concerts for hospitalized children around the world. The Whitney Houston Foundation officially recognized her work and funded the expansion of the program. Today, the Angels in the Ward program operates in over 100 hospitals across America, bringing music therapy to thousands of sick children. Jasmine, now 35 years old, has released 3 gospel albums, with all proceeds going to pediatric cancer research. She begins every concert with the same words. "A angel once told me that real voice comes from the heart." That angel's name was Whitney Houston, and she saved my life in more ways than one. This is for you, Whitney. The safe discovered in 2015 also contained a letter Whitney wrote to future generations. In it she said, "If you're reading this, it means my secret is out. Please understand that these hospital visits were not about charity or publicity. They were about love. Those children gave me more than I ever gave them. They taught me that true success isn't measured in record sales or awards, but in the lives you touch and the hope you inspire. Every child in that hospital was my teacher, my inspiration, my reason to keep going when everything else was falling apart." The 12 gospel songs found in the safe were eventually released as a posthumous album titled Angels in the Ward. It became the best-selling gospel album of the decade, with all proceeds going to pediatric hospitals. The album won 3 Grammy Awards, which Jasmine accepted on Whitney's behalf. In her acceptance speech, she said, "Whitney always said these songs weren't meant for the world, they were meant for us, the children who needed hope in our darkest hours. But now the world needs hope too, and Whitney's voice continues to provide it." The documentary about Whitney's hospital visits, released in 2018, won an Academy Award. But more importantly, it inspired thousands of artists to follow Whitney's example. Today, there are over 500 musicians regularly visiting hospitals, continuing the tradition Whitney started in secret. Newark Beth Israel Hospital has now established the Whitney Houston Pediatric Music Therapy Center, the first of its kind in the nation. The center treats over 1,000 children annually, using music as a healing tool. The waiting list is long, but no child is ever turned away. As the center's director says, "Whitney never turned away from a child in need. Neither will we." Jasmine goes to the hospital every year on February 11th, the anniversary of Whitney's death, and gives concerts to the children. She always ends her concert with the same song, Angels in the Ward, that Whitney wrote especially for her. And each time, she feels as if Whitney is there too, singing with her. Because real angels never die, they just become invisible. Whitney Houston's legacy continues to live, not just in the songs she left behind, but in the lives she touched, the souls she healed, the hearts she gave hope to. Her echo still exists in the corridors of Newark Beth Israel Hospital, silent, invisible but felt. Just like an angel's touch, the story of Whitney Houston's secret hospital visits reminds us that true greatness isn't measured by fame or fortune, but by the love we give when no one is watching. In those quiet hospital corridors, away from the spotlight and the crowds, Whitney Houston found her true voice, and that voice continues to sing. In every child who survived, in every dream that came true, in every note of hope that echoes through the halls of healing.